Hi, everybody. Welcome back. I hope you had a refreshing break. And we're going to move on because we've got really exciting talks this afternoon we want to get to as well. But I wanted to thank you for first engaging with us at the end of Heidi's talk and sharing your perspectives and thoughts in the chat and over the microphone too. So thank you. Keep it up. We really like to have this engagement, even though we're all virtual. So any opinions and comments, please let us hear them. I'm just going to turn it over to Kat right now so she can introduce our next speaker. And Kat, I'll just leave it to you. So thank you very much.
Hello, can you hear me okay? Does that work out? Perfect. Ani bonjour, Catherine Adishnikaz, Philippines and Dunjaba. My name is Catherine, and it's been a privilege to be in this FishCAST community with you all. It's my privilege and joy to introduce our next speaker. It was through a Canada Nature Fund grant that I was able to come into community with Katrina Keeshig, someone who's become a lab alumni and auntie at the Healthy Headwaters Lab here at GLEAR at the University of Windsor, and really needs no other introduction because her talk and what she's about to share with you about her experience in creating this bridge position that is the Indigenous Partnership Coordinator, a learning opportunity for all of us really wanting to grow and build programming like FishCAST in a holistic and partnership-driven way. So I will leave it at that and invite Kendra to share the screen. And we look forward to your continued contributions and conversation as we continue to grow FishCAST moving forward. Miigwech.
Ani Bojo Kinawea Miigwech Kibajayak. Hello, everyone, and thank you for coming. Katrina Keeshig, Indigenous, Nea Shiniming and Donjaba, Anishinaabe Kwendao. My name is Katrina Keeshig, and I'm from Nea Shiniming, or Chippewas of Nawash Unceded First Nation. Together with our sister nation, we are known collectively as the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, or San, which you heard from yesterday. I have a background in ecological monitoring and community engagement for about 10 years now. And other than working on the water and the land, my greatest passion is sharing knowledge and encouraging connection and curiosity in the natural world. I was born and raised here in my community, but I'm still working to deepen my knowledge and my relationship with my culture, which includes picking up my language, which is Ojibwe or Anishinaabemowin. More than any other role, I'm a proud auntie of my many beautiful nieces and nephews who inspire me every day to live in a good way and to honor both their gifts and my own, and to try and help support them and guide them when they need it. For the last 2 years, I've been living and working in Windsor with the Healthy Headwaters Lab out of the Great Lakes Institute for Environmental Research and with Walpole Island First Nation on a community-based restoration project. I am also the Indigenous Partnership Coordinator for FishCAST, which is a multi-institution and multi-year grant designed to complement graduate programs by providing additional training to students in the fisheries and aquatic sciences. I'm speaking from my home territory in Saugeen Anishinaabe King, or Saugeen Ojibwe territory, and I pay tribute to the traditional territories of the Three Fires Confederacy, comprised of the Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi nations. This refers to a confederacy of peoples whose languages and territories are somewhat overlapping and who had worked together for military and political purposes around the hub of the Great Lakes, beginning as early as 796 AD. Amongst the rights holders where much of our work takes place are Walpole Island First Nation and Caldwell First Nation. Additionally, within a small radius are Aamjiwnaang, Moravian of the Thames, Chippewas of Kettle and Stony Point, Munsee Delaware Nation, Chippewas of the Thames, and Oneida Nation of the Thames. All of these communities are leading efforts of their own to protect and conserve their territorial lands and waters. I'm just gonna take a drink. So when we say Indigenous territory, also referred to as traditional territory, What that's describing is the ancestral and contemporary connections of Indigenous peoples to a geographical area. Territories may be defined by kinship ties, occupation, seasonal travel routes, trade networks, management of resources, and cultural and linguistic connections to place. The Government of Canada recognizes 70 historic treaties in Canada signed between 1701 and 1923, many of which are currently in the courts to argue that the Crown did not uphold their side, or that they were intimidated into signing, or that the meaning and intent of Indigenous signatories was misconstrued. Most understood the treaty agreements as being the foundation of a relationship with the Crown, and that this relationship would be based on coexistence and sharing the land and its resources. To date, 26 modern treaties have been concluded between the Crown and Indigenous peoples, covering over 40% of Canada's landmass. Modern treaties, also known as comprehensive land claim settlements, include provisions that enable Indigenous groups to own land, participate in managing land and resources, share in revenue generated from resource development, and to govern themselves. There are more than 630 First Nation communities, 53 Inuit communities, and 8 Métis settlements in Canada, with many more people living outside of communities. Altogether, this represents over 50 separate nations and 50 distinct language groups. In Ontario alone, there are 133 First Nation communities representing at least 7 groups, including Algonquin, Mississauga, Odawa, Chippewa or Ojibwe, Potawatomi, Delaware, Cree, and Haudenosaunee. Each of these dots in the bottom right-hand corner represents a sovereign nation. Indigenous sovereignty is recognized and given effect by decades of formal alliances and treaties and connection to the land. Flowing from this sovereignty is the right to self-determination, along with the exercising of the constitutional right of self-government. This illustration of complexity and diversity is not meant to scare or intimidate or confuse you, but to illustrate that regardless of where your work is taking place, it is on the traditional territory of Indigenous nations, and it is connected to the present-day rights of Indigenous people, which include both shared and specific rights given to specific nations, which is why we need to work directly with communities as individual entities to learn from and understand specific rights, priorities, and concerns, but to also take that even further still. In this presentation, I'll be describing my role as FishCAST Indigenous Partnership Coordinator. This is a part-time contract aimed at guiding multiple threads of Indigenous engagement, partnership, and participation in FishCAST. I would also like to ensure that FishCAST could, where possible, provide local training and/or employment opportunities, and to support the goal of decolonizing science and supporting Indigenous capacity building. My role stems from the program commitments that you see on the screen here. Initial limitations of the grant were related to its flexibility and funding requirements under NSERC, and the fact that I didn't really have a large support network of Indigenous scholars, knowledge holders, and practitioners to reach out to, but that has been growing steadily ever since. One early outcome was to develop a micro-credential offer that will hopefully be delivered to each cohort, which will introduce topics and publicly available resources for reading or viewing, and then bring us together for reflection and discussion in a safe and inclusive space. The goal was to provide a very introductory overview of important terms, resources, concepts, and case studies for both students and PIs, as there seemed to be a gap in understanding of just how fundamental Indigenous rights and Indigenous Canada relations are when working in the natural resource and environmental fields. And this is in addition to working together to share knowledge and to partner on projects. I proposed a 12-week course divided into 6 themes, including rights, responsibilities, and obligations, acknowledgements of land, people, and history, truth, reconciliation, including reparations, Indigenous self-determination, and Indigenous-led conservation. We often speak about the importance of storytelling, and that shaped a lot of the approach to this offer. I wanted to provide Indigenous created resources and case studies that encourage students to go further and to develop empathy and understanding of some of the background issues or precursors to some of the polarizing conflicts between Indigenous and settler Canadians over lands and resources. Next steps included working with PIs and tapping into the amazing networks of Indigenous scholars, practitioners, students, and knowledge holders at each of the partner institutions, looking to expand Indigenous partners as internship opportunities and to build a network of people to contribute to or support development of curriculum, as well as present at weekly seminar series. Thankfully, more institutions are adding Indigenous studies and introductory curriculum that has been developed through extensive consultation and participation of Indigenous peoples from across the country and representative nations. Moreover, there are more courses, webinars, and learning opportunities such as this one than ever before. Early on, I developed a document and conducted a horizon scan of all the partner institutions, of the publicly available curriculum offers, local and relevant STEM offers for Indigenous youth, and of Indigenous fisheries organizations or management within communities. I felt like I started off strong, and then I suffered a little bit from what I would come to know as the only lonely effect. I felt alone and I felt very underqualified. And I wrestled with the idea of feeling like I wasn't the person who should be giving any of this advice. And I've slowly arrived at the fact, with lots of help, that our voices are needed, and that includes my own. Yesterday, Jennifer listed some of the important commissions, reports, and commitments, which include hundreds of options for moving forward toward the goal of reconciliation. She also mentioned that hardly any recommendations have been enacted. It has been 7 years since the finding of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and the 94 calls to action were released. And it's been over 20 years since the Royal Commission on Aboriginal People, which included hundreds of suggestions. Even though there's no section that calls in the calls to action directly related to environment or natural resource sectors, there's a well-established history of dispossession and violence associated. And there's a difference between referencing the calls to action in your work and understanding them. It can be easy to desensitize what exactly the commission was intended to do. Residential schools operated in Canada for more than 160 years, with upwards of 150,000 children passing through their doors, including all provinces and territories with the exception of PEI, Newfoundland, and New Brunswick. The last school didn't close until 1996, and First Nations, Métis, and Inuit children were removed, often against their will, from homes and communities and put into schools where they were forced to abandon their traditions, cultural practices, and languages. And yet this was just one tool in a broader plan of aggressive assimilation and colonization of Indigenous people and territories in Canada. If you haven't listened to some of these firsthand accounts of survivors, it's possible that you can't fully empathize with the level of suffering experienced within our communities. Residential schools were neither the beginning nor the end of genocidal policies, yet the effects are perhaps the most profound and are still unfolding, maybe even amplifying until this day. I truly feel that it's critical for settler Canadians to listen to these stories in order for reconciliation of any hope of moving forward. I believe that these are key understandings when engaging with Indigenous communities in any respect. And that being said, we must always counter stories of suffering with stories of thriving. And I'm filled with so much pride at the growing recognition of our resilience and excellence, our humor and ingenuity, our kinship, stories, traditions, languages, and identities, all of what keeps us and makes us unique and worthy of occupying the spaces that we've long been excluded from. Reconciliation will not be easy, and it might not be possible the way that it's currently being proposed, but we can't afford to do nothing. I believe that educating on the true history of pre and post contact is necessary for both Indigenous and non-Indigenous people alike. And in specific situations, it requires that we go even further and share perspective on historic relationships. In this quote, it says, "The principle of mutual recognition calls on non-Aboriginal Canadians to recognize that Indigenous people are the original inhabitants and caretakers of this land and have distinctive rights and responsibilities flowing from that status. It calls on Aboriginal people to accept that non-Aboriginal people are also of this land now, by birth and by adoption, with strong ties of love and loyalty. It requires both sides to acknowledge and relate to one another as partners, respecting each other's laws and institutions, and cooperating for mutual benefit." 2 years ago, when the tensions were rising between Nova Scotia and Mi'kmaq lobster fishers, it was really difficult to watch from home, even as Anishinaabe. Many of you maybe haven't heard of it before, but as Native people, we're very connected online. We call it Native Facebook or Native TikTok, Twitter, etc. And we're often exposed to firsthand accounts, to Indigenous perspectives, and we are usually aware of the historical harms leading up to things. And we also see the mainstream side of things, and it's very difficult to find Native-led journalism in mainstream media. This was upsetting to watch, even from Ontario, because you could feel the gap in education and understanding, and you could see the deflection of responsibility by government and law officials. My community, which was mentioned in 2 talks given yesterday, is a fishing community and nation and has been since time immemorial. A major court case that confirmed our rights to not only fish, but to be the only commercial fishery in our territory, which is large, was a major part of my childhood. Leading up to that, there was decades of conflict between non-Indigenous fishers and neighboring communities, DFO and MNR, and our fishermen. It sometimes led to violence, and it oftentimes led to unfair treatment, vandalism, and little opportunity for recourse. My community is now working in partnership with OMNRF, and this is in large part owing to deep commitment to conversation and to developing a working relationship, and especially to individuals in bridge or connector roles. As an Indigenous person, I do not claim to have all the answers, and I usually can only speak to my own experience. But my experience is also inherently a collective experience. The stories I grew up with and the information I received have shaped who I am. My childhood was deeply shaped by the connectedness of my community and the hours and hours spent together as a family unit with my grandparents and my father's 9 siblings, 9 brothers and sisters families. The connection and responsibility I have, as well as my connection to Indigenous people across Turtle Island, to others experiencing injustice, and to my non-human relatives. Empathy and connection are embedded in our blood memory. Growing up, I loved learning my language, but I only learned it in school. My grandparents were both fluent Ojibwe speakers, as were most of the elders in my community, and now there are only 6 speakers left. In our community, my father's generation was the first generation to be robbed of the language. Parents withheld it out of fear that their children might experience the same abuse as they did simply for speaking their native language. My father knows less of the language than I do. In our community, they were the children raised by the survivors of residential school, and my generation was raised by the children who are dealing with these confusing impacts of those schools. Tough love, strict adherence to religion, extreme work ethic, PTSD, substance abuse, repression, distrust of authority, and fear of our culture and language are just some of the obvious effects, and many more are less obvious. My grandma was always laughing when speaking with her friends, and the elders were always laughing. I would ask her what was funny, and she would always say it couldn't be explained in English. I learned my language from kindergarten to grade 9, but never got the opportunity to use it conversationally, and so I'm just now picking it up and trying to learn it. All of this is to say that what I am learning now is eye-opening and heartbreaking. Our language contains so much information and so many inherent lessons and teachings for how we see the world and how we relate to it. I can see how much was lost when they tried to take our language, and I can see how important it is to get it back. Our language cannot be separated from our role as caretakers and as participants in the web of life. My language, Anishinaabemowin, should have been my first language. You might have heard that we don't have words for please or for welcome. You're welcome. I have heard that this is to do with our intent. Words such as this are not necessary because we approached life reciprocally with good intentions for the benefit of all. Our language is inherently polite. In my language class the other day, this was elaborated on when we were discussing imperative commands. Our teacher laughed that for most instances, we knew the conjugated form instead of the actual verb because we were always being shouted at. Our teacher growing up was quite stern, yet sweet. And my current teachers reminded us that commands are actually spoken softly in our language and that they are invitations to join and participate rather than orders. Another two examples were shared, our word for love and our word for meeting. And both were broken down into their root words to explain the concepts. And I love that Brandon shared the word for love in his language yesterday. The word for love or mutual love is Zagyeediwin. The first part of the word relates to our word for lake, Zagyeegan, which describes the inflow and outflow and emergence. And the middle part, Ide, elaborates further to specify that which is reciprocal. The ending turns it into a noun, translating roughly into mutual flow, back and forth, and give and take. The second word for meeting is Zagasweeding. The first part, Zagaswe, refers to smoking. Again, in the middle, you see Ide, denoting reciprocation, and the ending, Iding, refers to a person unknown. Taking together, it's describing a scenario that when people smoke together, you are not going in for your own benefit, you are going in for the benefit of all to reach consensus decisions. At the heart of our language are fundamental differences between English and Western thinking and Anishinaabemowin life. When we speak of decolonizing and addressing trauma and the loss of our language, it is so much more than that. It is relearning our words, and as my dear friend put it, it is like being seen for the first time, realizing why we look at the world the way we do, and why we might feel at odds with its current state. Everything comes down to our language, our blood memory, our original instructions for how to live, for how to relate to the world and everything in it. Everything is embedded within the language. The removal of our languages was very intentional, and it was at the core of assimilation policies. And it is probably one of, if not the most important thing to focus our energy and attention on. In Christy Belcourt's words, the planet already contains all of the wisdom of the universe, as do you and I. It has the ability to recover built into its DNA, and we have the ability to change what we are doing so that this can happen. I'm really excited by the conversations that are taking place and the spaces that are being created. And I do have a cynical side that says we're not moving fast enough, or we aren't focusing on important issues, or we aren't being seen in our entirety. But I am grounded by the optimism and steadfastness of others. And we are here to rebuild. And one of my roles is to be a bridge. Bridges are designed to direct traffic, to allow for flow, for exchange in both directions. They allow us to overcome obstacles and to get you quicker from point A to point B. And they are often the strongest where two sides meet in the center. But as a bridge, you're both connected to land and separated from it. And that much has been true for my experience in academia. To fill these spaces has meant that I've been separated from the place I want to be, which is on the land and water. And so part of the work of decolonization is acknowledging that the work that is needed is on the land, and that we need to be connected to. It takes a lot of time and effort to meaningfully partner with Indigenous communities from both perspectives. And there are fundamental differences in worldviews, in power dynamics, timelines, capacity, capital, priorities, colonized versus decolonized approaches, both from an Indigenous and non-Indigenous perspective, politics, again, from both sides, and in scientific understanding. However, we do share common goals, and we acknowledge that the natural world requires us to do better now and not later. There is so much important work happening And a silver lining of the pandemic has been the shift to virtual offers that allows us to be together in spaces like these. There are many great examples of collaboratives, conferences, and symposiums that spotlight the work on Indigenous-led conservation and land management. I've spent a dedicated amount of time conducting horizon scans and compiling resources, and yet I'm still finding new things each day. I think we need to work collectively at sharing resources and experiences so that we can build off each other's successes and collaborate where it makes sense. I envision an establishment of an online network that houses important information, resources, maps, videos, and data. And I would also like to see the establishment of an Indigenous Technical Training Summit to be held at various locations in the province or country that'll allow us to come together and access training or learning opportunities that might otherwise be limited to smaller communities or programs that haven't quite been established. I envision a place and opportunity to share lessons learned amongst our communities and to discuss issues such as long-term funding, land-based learning, language revitalization, connectivity, cumulative impact monitoring and assessment. And I especially envision the centering of community in all aspects of working with all generations from the young to elderly to share knowledge and to invest heavily in securing our languages for present and future generations. Ahaw, miigwech. Ani bojo kinawea miigwech kibajayak. Hello, everyone.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back. And please join me in thanking Katrina, I believe, here on the talk today for that really heartfelt, meaningful, vulnerable talk. Thank Chimagwech, Katrina. Katrina, if Katrina would like to answer any questions or we'd like to open up a discussion, I think that would be fantastic if we want. I just wanted to say just one thing in terms of FishCAST. Katrina is a bridge, and she's a lonely bridge in FishCAST. And we hear her, we're listening, and we're going to be opening up to a wider community to make sure that she's supported. Bridges all need support, and there's not just one bridge. And so we want to thank you for that and know that we want you to feel as connected as possible and whenever possible. So miigwech again. So let's turn it over. We got amazing comments coming up right now in the chat. Does anybody want to open up with any comments or questions? Please feel free. Just to let you know that Kat Fabria, she posted in the chat what Katrina was referencing to. That's Jennifer Syllaboy from the Mi'kmaq First Nation, talking about the fish and healthy oceans matter to people. So please check that out if you do have the time. Cheyenne said, amazing talk. Celine Odette said, wonderful talk, a lot to think of. And Steve said, wow, what a nuanced and mature perspective, and thank you. Yeah. And Kat just reminded me that Katrina was mentioning the micro-credential that's coming, that Katrina has been preparing. And so I think Kendra already reached out to the trainees to see when everyone's availability is going to be. But again, we have a role to play as FishCAST community members and PIs. And so we're asking all of our PIs to attend at least 2 of the sessions that will be happening, because Katrina's course will take micro-credential will be taking place over, I think, 10 weeks. And so we're asking everyone to sign up. We're going to be putting out the agenda, but to help facilitate at least 2 of these mini reflection circles, simply because we want everyone to be engaged. We want to show that support. And we also want to make sure that, Katrina is not the only bearer load of this bridge, getting people's feedback and reflections. And I think it's incumbent on all of us to become involved just as well. So please make sure, again, we'll be sign up for it, FishCAST PIs, because it's something that will really, really help us and help Katrina and help us on our journey as well, because there's a lot to learn and a lot to grow and a lot to reflect on. So thank you. Yes, and Dr. Fabria said we invite all FishCAST to journey with us through this new micro-credential. So Katie's saying thank you, Katie Stamler. I was hoping that would be available to us. Yes. Jessica said, it's not just on the new generation, change must infiltrate every level, excited to listen and learn alongside the PIs. Yes, exactly. And that was one of the big feedback we had received from our JEDI diversity network. And some of the questions we had from our ECRs, early career researchers and early career practitioners, was where are the older people in this networking? They really found that, you know, one of the feedbacks that we got was like, we were just preaching to the choir. It was people who weren't at the table that are the ones that are sometimes the gatekeepers. And so that's why we want to stress yet again, and to echo what Jessica said, that it's just not on the new generation that are always so keen and are always so prepared to learn and start their journey. It's really on us that are kind of set in our ways that we really have to become involved in this, because Katrina highlighted the importance that, again, we're all treaty land inhabitants and all the work that we do are on traditional and unceded territories. So Kendra said that when Kendra has a date finalized from the trainees and with Katrina's availability, and of course the PIs, we'll share it with the FishCAST community. Kat, did you want to add anything? Katrina, anything at all? We're good? Okay, fantastic. Chimagwech again, Katrina, for sharing sharing your thoughts, your feelings, your emotions, and your amazing perspective on this. It was, I hope we've all heard, and not just here, but I hope we're listening as well. And again, FishCAST has a lot of work to do, so thank you. Okay, well, we're going to move on. Again, more reflecting to do, and also more enjoying to do. It is now my absolute pleasure to begin the session on the lightning talks and the presentations by our FishCAST trainees. And I would like to introduce both Dr. Christine Magliger and Dr. Catherine Fabria. There they are. And I would really love for Christine to open it with us. We want to learn more about Christine. She's our postdoctoral fellow, soon to be former postdoctoral fellow. And she's been with us for many steps of the way in terms of her integration into our team. And she's been such an incredible resource asset. And we've learned, and we always learn so much from Christine as well. So if you don't mind, Christine, taking the floor and just, you know, letting the community learn about you and what you do.
Thanks very much, Tina. So I'm just going to share my screen first. Okay. So what I'm just going to do is tell you a little bit. Sorry?
That's good.
It's okay? Okay. So what I'm going to do is just tell you a little bit about my FishCAST journey. As Tina said, it's going to end a bit shorter than I anticipated it would. So I was expecting to be here for about a year, and it's getting cut short by about half. So what you're going to see is a little bit about the projects I've been involved in, none of the results yet, but just about what we were trying to accomplish, and then all that other wonderful results will be forthcoming. And what I wanted to do first was just acknowledge the fact that I have had wonderful mentorship through the FishCAST program. So Trevor Pitcher and Steve Cook are my co-supervisors, but I've also had the opportunity to do internship time with Andrew Drake at DFO, and that's been wonderful in terms of creating our research agenda with these sort of downstream applications within government in mind. So the focus of the research side of my time with FishCAST has been looking at transport stress, particularly finding ways to minimize it. And my interest and the interest of my supervisors and internship partner is for small-bodied species at risk fishes in particular. And there are a whole bunch of reasons why we tend to move fish around. It can be for stocking reasons or for aquaculture applications. Sometimes we're bringing in fish into captive situations to establish breeding populations. And another really big one is through translocation. So when we're doing things like reintroductions or reinforcements. And fish get moved in a whole variety of different ways. Sometimes we fly them around in helicopters and airplanes. Other times they take boat rides. I've seen very specialized applications where, you know, small containers of fish are being transported in backpacks to remote locations for release. But probably the most common way that we move fish around is in trucks, so in, you know, coolers, or in very specialized live wells and haulers. And the thing with that actual transport event that the fish are experiencing is that process itself represents a stressor for the fish. And so when we're thinking about having to move around species at risk fishes, and if we sort of look across the country at the species that we have listed, there's a whole variety of them where if we go into their recovery strategies, reintroduction is included as a potential way to help recover populations. So this is a very important aspect of how we might be able to recover populations. What we want to do is try to minimize the stress during those transport events and hopefully give the fish the best opportunity to establish in new locations. So there are a number of ways that we can try to minimize the transport stress. One is if you have a captive population, we have the opportunity to do preparatory techniques. Probably the most common one here is before you move the fish, you take away food for about 24 to 48 hours to decrease metabolism and make it so the captive transport containers don't get fouled as much, so you're maintaining water quality. In addition, we try to minimize handling overall because every time that fish gets air exposed, again, that's cumulative stress. The other thing we can do is use methods during the actual transport process. So in some cases, temperature gets lowered. In other cases, there's things we can add to the compounds we can add to the water to maintain water quality or to maintain the mucus coating on the fish, for example. And then sort of the last effort that we can put forward is trying to promote recovery on arrival. So the actual way that we release the fish, the harshness of that can have an impact potentially on their recovery and ability to establish. So what I did for my FishCAST work was take part in 2 different experiments. The first one is in a captive setting on red-side dace. So there's a population that Trevor Pitcher has in a hatchery close to Windsor here. And so this work, I was really excited because I got to work with Trevor's PhD student, Ashley Watt. And so part of this is going into her PhD thesis, which is also very exciting. But the wonderful opportunity that we had with this species at risk, because they were captive, we could test the influence of some of those preparatory techniques that we do before we actually transport the fish. So what we decided to do was manipulate feeding. And so we did a 6-week pre-transport feeding manipulation. We had some of the fish that were just kept on their normal diet that they were accustomed to in the hatchery, but then we also had a group that we increased their diet. We gave them a high ration, high quality diet to increase their condition. The other thing we did that we layered on top of this was we looked at the difference between sort of benign captive environments versus those that we enriched their environments as well to see if any of these techniques could influence their ability to recover from the transport stress. And so we had control groups, and then we did 2 different drive times, 3 hours and 6 hours, which are sort of common ones that we tend to see across the literature. And then we were looking at the consequences on a few metrics of physiology. So we had a collaboration with Andy Turco, who's a postdoc at Laurier now. So we used respirometry to measure maximum metabolic rate, but we also looked at sort of their upper thermal tolerance. So we did CT max or critical thermal maximum trials as well. And so I'm very excited because this is integrated into Ashley's PhD thesis that we can start getting our results together and see if any of those preparatory techniques can have an impact on how the fish experience the transport stress. The other thing that I designed with our collaborators is working on eastern sand darter. So in this case, we're working in a wild population in the Grand River. And in this case, we could look at the influence of those post-transport recovery techniques. And what we did was we compared sort of the traditional method where you drive the fish around. Sometimes, you acclimate them for maybe half an hour with the water in their new waterway, but you're pretty much just dumping them in there. And then you're hoping that they're able to, forage, find food, escape predation, all of those things that they have to do in this entirely new environment. In contrast, sort of on the other end of the spectrum, there's an opportunity to use something called soft release methods. What this means is that you allow the fish to acclimate for a longer period of time, sort of in a safe space. So we built enclosures that we could put the fish in within the waterway, and we allowed them to stay in them for 24 hours, with the idea being that potentially that recovery time will allow them to be able to, recover and be able to make a living in their new environment a little easier. We also are doing this over 2 seasons to see if there's any difference in terms of whether we move the fish in the spring in terms of transport stress versus the fall. So I'm going back next week to finish the fall part of this study. So we collected these fish using seining methods. We did a control and a 2-hour transport. So we chose 2 hours because this is a likely sort of upper range of where these fish might get transported if a reintroduction program starts up. And then we compared these soft versus hard release, and the metrics we were measuring to see whether these release methods or whether seasonally there was a difference in terms of transport stress was behavior in this case. So we did behavioral trials where we were looking at things like activity level and risk-taking behavior, things that tend to relate back to the ecological aspects of how the fish will behave in its environment. And then we also did sort of a crude physiological measurement looking at swimming performance as well. So again, I'm excited to finish this and then see if these types of techniques can be beneficial within true reintroduction programs potentially. Now, the other part of FishCAST that I've had the wonderful opportunity of being involved in is the micro-credential side of things. So I was very lucky to get to work with Kat Fabria to be able to co-create, co-lead, and co-deliver a micro-credential that was focused on outreach and science communication. And so beyond the sort of tangible skills that we wanted trainees to be able to acquire in terms of making, producing actual outreach projects and items, we really wanted to highlight that communication can be a critical research tool regardless of what your research topic is. And that choosing your audience is a really important consideration, tailoring your delivery medium to that audience, framing your topic, choosing your language, and then trying to incorporate narrative and storytelling as much as possible. And so we sort of took some of the core fundamentals that are out there in terms of science communication, but then allowed the students to sort of work in the direction that they felt most comfortable and to gain the skills that they most wanted to. And in a lot of cases, what you'll see is that the trainees either made new or really strengthen their connections to their community partners through developing these projects. It's been about a 2.5-month process, and I've been so impressed with what the trainees have developed over that time. So it's really exciting for me to introduce the final, the sort of last major part of the AGM, which is lightning talks by all of the trainees that participated in this outreach micro-credential. So what you're going to see is that the trainees will give you an overview of their general FishCAST research project, but then they're going to focus in on what they did for the outreach course. They'll tell you the topic, their target audience, and the wonderful, exciting part is that they're going to give you an overview or some of the highlights of the actual outreach items that they produce. And we have a whole variety of different topics and types of outreach materials. So I'm excited to see them all in one place. And then in some cases, you'll also hear about the partnerships that they were involved in and their next steps for their outreach journey, because we have a lot of trainees that are putting or have already put or are planning to put their outreach items in much out into the larger community, which is also exciting too. Okay, so I am going to stop sharing my screen, and then I'm going to introduce our first speaker. Okay. So our first trainee is Jessica Reed. She is a master's student at Carleton University, and she's very lucky in the draw that she gets to go first. But Jess, whenever you're ready, you are welcome to share.
Thanks so much. My dog just woke up, so this might be a disaster. He knew the exact time that I was going to go. Can everyone see my presentation slide?
Yes, looks perfect.
Okay, wonderful. Let me just mute this. Hi, everyone. My thesis explores the topic of freshwater fish movements, specifically in an urban river and then connected restored areas. I use 2 different telemetry techniques to track fish, and that can help me answer questions about where they move, at what times, and I get to compare that across different seasons. My work takes place in Ottawa on the territories of the Algonquin, Mohawk, and Anishinaabe nations on a water body now known as the Jock River. The Jock River is experiencing intensive land use change from both urban development and agricultural practices. So an overall goal of my work is to understand what fishes are in the system and then what areas of the river would be important for their ecology. So for my outreach item, I decided to create a video for my community partners. I took so many pictures and videos all summer that I thought I should make something with it. So my community partners are the Rideau Valley Conservation Authority, the Ottawa chapter of Muskies Canada, and the Ottawa Field Naturalists Club. I wanted to design an outreach item that would showcase all the aspects of fieldwork that are involved in order to do a master's thesis or answer these questions surrounding fish movements. The video itself kind of gives insight into what different tasks and duties are performed by a fish biologist, how we design our studies, and I think the best part is it shows exactly what my community partners' funding helps to make possible. So in the video itself, I go over background information about the Jock River and why there's potential for concern around its overall health, the different methods that I use to catch fish, and then the 2 different tracking methods. Full of pictures and videos of my beautiful study area, all the different fish that I worked with, and action shots of equipment in action. I think my video visually connects the community to the species, the lands, and the waters that we're working so hard to conserve. I hope my outreach item educates my audience on both the existing and emerging issues facing the Jock River. It can engage people in aspects of fieldwork they may have never heard of or seen before, because sometimes it can be difficult to care about local conservation issues when you have no idea what the topic is or you can't even picture the animals in your mind. So that's why I think this video could be so impactful. I hope my community partners and audience feel appreciated and that their money and resources are being used effectively. For example, volunteer anglers might be able to see themselves in some of the footage and realize how big of a role they're playing in this bigger freshwater conservation story. And then aside from today, I hope my video, I want to share it across social media platforms and even at other meetings with my community partners. Again, to just drive home the point of the importance of studying subjects like this, fostering community support, interest, and funding for years to come. Thanks so much for listening, and I hope you enjoy all the other lightning talks after me.
Thank you, Jess. Okay. So our next speaker is Acacia from Pongmanso, who's also from Carleton University, and she's working on her PhD there.
Just give me 1 second while I share
No
my
problem.
screen. It's just going to take a second to load. And everybody see my screen now.
Looks good.
Okay, perfect. So hi everyone, my name is Acacia. I'm a first-year PhD student here at Carleton, and I am supervised by both Dr. Stephen Cook as well as Dr. Keith Vanderwright from Kansas U. So for my project and my thesis, it focuses on understanding that biodiversity in freshwater ecosystems are undergoing a rapid global decline, and one of the major drivers of this decline is the actions of humans. So the focus of my thesis will be studying ways in which shoreline erosion controls can be enhanced to yield conservation gains. So here in this photo here, in Florida, there's been recent research involving the modification of engineered concrete shorelines to include elements of mangroves. So the concept of these walls is to incorporate more natural features, and in doing so, the hope is to provide more complex habitat that can be used by wildlife. So for my PhD, I'll be developing and testing the same concept here in the Rideau system, and this will be the first time that such tests have ever occurred in fresh waters. So rather than using the mangrove root design, I'll use a woody debris design as inspiration for my project. So for this outreach project, I decided to do a coloring book for children that focuses on the topic of shoreline erosion. Many of the pictures that I included in this coloring book will consist of the different types of shorelines that we have here in Canada and how they differ by region, as well as the issues that are impacting them. In addition to the coloring pages, I did want to include some information about what shorelines are, what shoreline erosion is, and some ways in which the children who read these books can kind of help keep their shorelines healthy. So while this is a coloring book, I did want to add some sort of educational element. That way the kids can build upon their current knowledge as well as develop new knowledge so they can figure out ways to become more involved in their community when coming to dealing with shoreline erosion. So here is just kind of a sample shot of the character that takes them across Ontario and kind of gives them a fun fact of each province before they move on to the next one. And here's an example kind of a little bit of a blurb in which they get to color a shoreline. They get to write down some ideas that they can talk about with other students or with a parent. The target audience for this project was ages between 8 and 12. And because that this age range is so wide, the hope was this to be used as an educational tool to again allow them to expand on their current knowledge and also to be used as educational materials that teachers can use to make this a fun kind of interesting thing. And that's my project.
Thank you, Acacia. Okay. So our next speaker is Baptiste Brunet, who's at the University of Quebec at Rimouski as a master's student.
Hello everyone. Okay, just 2 seconds. I will share my screen. I don't know how to do. Okay, did you see my screen?
Yep, there it is.
Okay, so hello everyone. So I'm Baptiste Brunet. I'm a master student in Rimouski, supervised by Céline Audet, Dominique Lapointe, and David Deslauriers. So for my outreach, for my FishCAST research, I'm going to work on Atlantic tomcod. So I will soon be doing an internship in October or November with the Ministère des Forêts, de la Faune et des Parcs du Québec. The aim of this internship will be to acquire more information about the impact of recreational fishing on this species during the winter. It will also be to find new spawning sites for the species. I will have more information on this internship in the next week. Then for my outreach for FishCAST, I choose to talk about the new problematic of the comeback of stripe-based population in the Gulf of St. Lawrence. So I made a short video who explained who I am, on what is my master degrees, and some information about stripe-based. So I let you with the video. I just share my screen for the video. Okay, did you see?
Yes.
Good. Did you do you hear the sound or not?
I don't hear the sound. So when you share your screen with Teams, there's a little sort of toggle you have to click at the top that says include computer sound. So if you didn't do that, maybe unshare and try again.
Unshare.
Yeah. So if you drop, you see.
The sound of the computer.
That's right.
Sorry. Just 2 minutes.
Oh, don't worry.
Sorry. It's a bit long, but it doesn't work. I don't know why.
Won't let you share it all?
What? It worked just before, but No, doesn't work. I don't know why.
Well, what we could do is we could try again towards the end. What you could do is leave and come back in.
I could come back at the end.
Yeah, and then we'll, at the end, I'll have you try again. Try leaving the meeting and coming back in, and then I'll come back to you at the end and you can give it another whirl. Does that sound okay?
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay,
I'm
you're
sorry.
welcome. No, don't apologize. Okay, so our next speaker is Katrina Odette, who is a master's student at the University of Manitoba.
Hi, everyone. So once per year, the province of Manitoba, oh, sorry, my presentation, I guess, Kendra, can you share it?
Yeah, I was just clicking into it. Let me know if you see it.
Yep, it's there.
All right, so once per year, the province of Manitoba monitors Lake Winnipeg's fish stocks using gill netting techniques, which is a traditional monitoring tool. Through my internship with Jeff Klein from the government of Manitoba, I had the opportunity to join the gill netting crew on their sampling excursions. They collect data on fish such as age, sex, weight, species distribution, and population estimation. And so my project proposes the use of a non-invasive method called eDNA as a supplemental tool for monitoring fish stocks in Lake Winnipeg year-round when gill netting might not be possible. eDNA consists of DNA shed by an organism into their environment in the form of skin cells, gametes, and waste. For fish, eDNA is shed every day into the water and can then be collected into a bottle, filtered, and then analyzed in the lab to see which species was present at the time of sampling. To showcase my work, I've decided to create the infographic you see here on the screen, as well as a Twitter thread that you can access through the QR code. You will notice that I have not made this Twitter thread public yet, since I would love to get input from you, the audience, before publishing it. At the bottom of each picture in my Twitter thread, you will see a sentence or paragraph that begins with the letter ATL. This is a Twitter feature that I plan to use when I publish my thread, which allows you to add a description with your photograph, making it accessible for individuals who may be visually impaired. For many of the tweets in my thread, I had trouble keeping things short and to the point. This is because Twitter puts a maximum of 280 characters for each tweet. But I realize now it's probably a good thing because I would probably lose everyone with my rambling. And so I chose Twitter as the platform to share my work because it allows for casual scrolling of posts that are often filtered to your own interests and search tendencies and works to connect people with similar passions and hobbies. With that in mind, the target audience that I chose for my project are the anglers who come from all across Canada and the United States to Lake Winnipeg for recreational purposes or competitive fishing events. I believe that anglers would be interested to learn about my research since it has direct impact on their favorite hobby and/or career, which also happens to be my favorite subject, fish. Due to the simplistic nature of eDNA collection, I've indicated that there could even be opportunities for collaboration with anglers by getting them involved in monitoring the fish they enjoy to catch. Traditional methods of monitoring our fish stocks will always be important, but eDNA may be a possible solution when gill netting is not. Finally, I would like to thank everyone listed on my slide for their important contributions to my project. I couldn't have done it without all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Katrina. Okay, our next speaker is Nicholas Tugi, who is a master's student here at the University of Windsor.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, cool. I'm just one thing at a time, trying to set up this one slide. Sorry, bear with me. Okay. Can you guys see my background? Sorry, I don't have a camera right now. My camera is broken.
Yep, we can see the screen.
Okay, so my thesis explores transcriptional profiling of ozone regulatory stress on Chinook salmon reared in freshwater and saltwater environment. I'll give a little bit of background on transcriptional profiling, as this is a determination of pattern of key genes expressed at the level of transcription under the specific circumstances or desired tissue of interest. I look forward to provide a global picture of cellular and organism function. The description of audience that I plan on targeting with my outreach item would be government officials, private companies, fish farm managers, and indigenous communities. I chose these entries as this genre will be blog posts. Blog posts in the science world are very important and very informative about specific topics. For example, having an important headline will grab the attention's reader and draw them towards the blog post, as these blog posts are not too long and too short. They state the problem, the solution, and ways that we can go forward, as this allows most interpreters to quickly get the message through and understand, okay, this is how it's going to be, and these are the solutions that it will come to be. It is an effective way to inform everyone about the serious implications that can occur if fish conservation is not taken as seriously as it is. An overview of my outreach item are the 3 blog posts should and will describe the understanding of fish conservation in aquaculture. Each blog post highlights significance of fish conservation that the blogs are discussing. A very big component that the blog posts discuss are a stress response transcriptional profile, an SCP chip. It is a suite of gene transcription assays that represents key gene pathways broadly associated with fish functional responses to environmental stress and allows for a different expression of well-suited genes monitoring fish health, as this allows interpretation of how fish are moved from one area to another and the extreme processes that they do undergo throughout this, as they exhibit massive energetic costs between transfers from fish and saltwater. But it is important to have this data as we're transitioning from saltwater to freshwater farms. This impacts everyone that is associated with farming. As I mentioned, government officials, private fish farmers, and the indigenous community. The indigenous community, I want to say, is the most affected by this transition, as they heavily rely on these resources, and it is a very cultural significance, as this represents family, foundation, and sustainable food resources. And I want to be able to provide a picture for everyone that these farms can be saved. There just has to be different ways to do it. Having this SCP chip will allow for everyone to get an idea of what circumstances will be done to these fish if they transfer from salt to fresh, how small their fish farm will be, or how much of a cost it will be. But global population is still increasing, and the need for sustainable food resources will increase. Increasing marine salmonids in freshwater will benefit the world on a global scale and help erase the pressure of limited food resources. Currently, my partnership is with Yale Island Aquaculture. My supervisor, Daniel Heath, I worked on the farm with him, and this summer we were able to collect samples for myself, and it is a very good opportunity to understand and try to provide as much information to everyone in the world about how important it is that fish conservation is taken very seriously, and we can provide as much benefits to the entire community as human population is growing, and agriculture needs to be taken very seriously, as if we don't, then we will not be able to sustain everyone and on this planet.
Thank you very much, Nicholas, for presenting your project. Okay, the next person who's up is Dominique Rumble, who's from the University of Toronto and working on a master's degree.
Thank you for the introduction, Christine. Would you mind just confirming you can see my slide properly?
Looks great.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you again. My name is Dominique Rumpel, and my research looks at the effectiveness of recovery actions taken for aquatic species at risk. Most recently, my research has been focused on conducting pre-monitoring for a restoration project creating spotted gar habitat in Rondo Bay. This research served as my inspiration to create a children's book entitled Finding a Forever Home: The Adventures of Gary the Spotted Gar. This book is being created for Ontario elementary school students, grades 1 to 5, with the objective of creating awareness for the relationship that fish, mussel, and turtle species at risk have with their habitats. The book starts with Gary the Gar being born to meet a northern sunfish and warmouth who teach Gary about the perfect home where water is clear, there are lots of plants, and tons to eat. Shortly after, Gary gets dipnated by two biologists, myself, Dominique, and Noha, who explain that Gary is a species at risk and very rare. After being released by the biologist, Gary starts on an adventure to find the perfect home. It turns scary when Gary gets stuck in turbid water and is luckily saved by Lena, the lake chubsucker. Together, they go off in search of a forever home and meet more mussel and fish species at risk friends along the way. The two are about to give up when Gary gets caught in a fyke net and meets Serafina, the snapping turtle. Although the two get off to a snappy start, they become friends from afar. Dominique returns to free Gary from the net, joined by Craig, a biologist working for the St. Clair Conservation Authority. Gary gets a new piece of jewelry that will help the biologists figure out what kind of places Gary likes to spend time in. Months later, Gary is frightened by some very loud noises and sees Dominique on the edge of the bank. Dominique teaches Gary about restoration, explaining that people from all over the community are coming to help build Gary a forever home. Over the years, this place becomes Gary's perfect forever home, and Gary lives happily ever after. This book has been created and will continue to be created with the collaboration of many different entities, including teachers, fellow FishCAST colleagues, and several conservation authorities. Throughout the book, this collaboration will be highlighted with the inclusion of a collection of resources related to the book's contents. My next step with the project are to secure funding, a publisher, and find or create relevant resources that will accompany the book. With that being said, I invite all those in attendance today to join this journey with me. Please email me or contact me by filling out this form with any feedback, comments, questions, recommendations for resources, or opportunities to collaborate. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for sharing. Okay, our next presenter is Ryan Graham, who's working on a master's degree at the University of Windsor.
Am I good to go?
Looks good.
Awesome. Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Ryan Graham. I'm a second-year master's student in the Healthy Headwaters Lab. I'm in cohort 1 of FishCAST, and that means I'm on the way out, but my research was focused on the ecosystem and habitat assessment theme. I did biodiversity surveys in vegetational drain or agricultural drains across Windsor, Essex, and my outreach project stayed in that ecosystem realm. So I decided to create a project a little bit further away from fish, like many of the other projects that you've seen, but I've decided to focus on the native trees that make up all of our local conservation areas around us. The outreach project itself will be a printable resource and will be accompanied by marked trees in the local conservation area that is going to act as a tree tour. There's a lot of resources and tree tours in the GTA, and researching some sort of outreach project like this allowed me to see how much there is in other areas and see where we are lacking information in Windsor, Essex County. So for my outreach goals, I hope to provide a free self-guided learning resource that'll be utilized by individuals and possibly in classrooms. I hope to indicate the importance of trees for the entire ecosystem and focus the content of this outreach project for connecting trees' role in watersheds in a whole. And then also I will share more information about some important history across Windsor, Essex through this outreach project. And I focused on one conservation area, Maidstone Conservation Area, which is a small 20-acre woodlot, but I'll explain why very soon. So On the left is my actual rough draft of what I think a one-page tree tour would be. On the left, you see instructions, a map, and trail etiquette and guidelines. And on that trail map, you can see directional arrows and then numbered locations. On the back of this one-page sheet is the actual content of my outreach. And this is a very, very rough draft of the content. And I kind of wanted to just include information that I thought was important, and I'll explain my audience in a second. But yeah, this started out as an identification workshop, and then I realized that trying to fit all different species and pictures of bark and leaves, it would be a lot harder to do. So I focused more of my outreach project on a dialogue of stopping at a specific location. Most of these points ask you to look around for marked shagbark hickory or maples or basswood. So stops 1, 2, 3, and 6 focus on trees, and then stops 4 and 5 focus on some more important historical things. Like, for example, the river trees. Like, I ask any viewer to look at the trees around the river. I reference some important reasons why it's important to have trees around rivers. And then in this Maidstone Conservation Area, there's actually a historical Indigenous signal tree that has unfortunately been vandalized in 2019 with firecrackers. So I'll get into a little bit more about why it's important to include that, but this is a rough draft of what I think a tree tour would look like. The further steps after this, after I've developed this, is to figure out how I want to tag trees and correspondingly show people at each location what kind of tree it is. And then all of this work will be followed up with posts on Instagram, Facebook, IRCA websites. I'll have a downloadable PDF for everybody to see, and then we'll also try to post photos of each station so they know what to expect when they get to the conservation area. The benefits of a project like this is that it highlights the important part of mostly every conservation area while also connecting visitors to the entire ecosystem. It's considered a staffless event where if you set it up, you can have it running without any staff being there, and it may be cost effective. I think that providing a self-guided outdoor education tour would be a very good resource for teachers to use in outside classrooms. And there's further expansion into other areas and other content that you can focus more on. So the challenges remaining for me in this project is the lacking the graphical design skills to make it look good enough to put out to the public. Indicating what content to include. Like I said, I really struggled whether I focus on identification features versus more of a storyline, like what I focused on in that draft that you saw. I need to refine my audience. The previous draft showed that it was kind of geared towards more of a younger audience. I asked them to look at the trees. Why do you think a shagbark hickory is called a shagbark hickory? And I kept it a little bit funner than what it would be for a mature audience. So I need to refine my audience. I also need to identify the language barriers. I only speak English, but I would love for this to be provided in more than just English. And then obviously the logistics of tree marking and labeling. My next steps for me is further collaboration with Essex Regional Conservation Area staff. It's Hawkfest this weekend down here, so there's a lot of emphasis away from their emails. They're all focused on getting an event going this weekend, so I haven't had much chance to talk with them. It's also important to reach out to Indigenous communities here because the history of signal trees is not my history to talk about. So I want to make sure that I reach out to the rightful knowledge holders and see what they would want to be shared in an educational platform like this. And then I'm actually going to further develop this into a hopeful project proposal that IRCA can review and see if there's actual merit to this project. So thank you so much for listening. And if you do have any ideas or ways to expand them, my email is right there. And thank you to all the FishCAST members that helped craft this idea and give examples of their work that they've done similar to this. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. Okay, our next speaker is Connor Reed, and he is pursuing a PhD at Carleton University.
Hi, everyone. Just got the presentation going. Can everybody see this?
Yep.
Great, thanks. So thank you. My name is Connor. I'm supervised by Steve Cook at Carleton and John Midwood at DFO. My research this summer mostly focused on two projects. So one was looking at the effects of chemical anesthesia and electrical immobilization on the quality of parental care behavior in nesting smallmouth bass. So on the bottom left, there's a bass guarding a nest, and then next to that is another bass who didn't like how close I was getting to its nest. And the second project was doing sort of the electrical equivalent of dose response curves for electroanesthesia and how this might relate to things like body shape and size in largemouth bass. And there's a few members of the amazing field team that I was with this summer. For my outreach project, I did a concept for a traveling museum exhibition called Veins of the Earth, Connecting with Our Rivers and Streams. And this is all about highlighting the ecological and human importances of rivers and streams. How are we using them? How are we affecting them? And then also promoting conservation efforts that are happening today and in the future. It's geared towards the general public, so families and students, etc. And we can include things like donations to local conservation groups in the ticket pricing for immediate action before people even attend. What it would actually look like when someone goes into a hypothetical gallery like this is you have a first zone is very introductory, fundamentally, what are rivers and streams? What are their sources? Where do they end up? What sorts of organisms live in rivers and streams? And then what's habitat structure like as you move throughout one? Because it's a traveling exhibition, there's room to feature local examples that people might have connections to or might be able to build connections to afterwards. So we can feature a local river, talk about its structure and biodiversity more specifically, its stewardship, land ownership, who takes care of it, who's involved in it, and what specific threats that river or stream is facing. That leads more broadly into the third area, which is about human use and human impacts on river structure and biodiversity, and can feature more sort of global highlights on case studies like maybe the St. Lawrence River and the Yangtze River in China. And then lastly is looking forward to the future. So how does river restoration work? What sorts of research and monitoring efforts are underway? What conservation groups are out there in Canada, and who can actually make a difference? And then as someone attending the exhibition, a member of the community, how can you participate and support these actions and maybe even get your feet on the ground moving forward? As a specific example of what you might see in there, so here's an interactive exhibit for the introductory zone on stream habitat types. So there'd be like an infographic panel on the left. I'm not very good at art, so apologies for the quality of that, but infographic panel detailing things like pools, riffles, and runs, and what actually is in a stream habitat. And then coupled with that is like a touch screen game where questions pop up and there'd be an actual picture or good art of a stream, and it says, where's the riffle? And someone touches that, and then some information and facts pop up about riffles. And then, where's the pool? Same sort of deal. And that's it. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Connor. Okay, our next trainee is Markel Morfett, who is at the University of Toronto working on a master's project.
Hello, everyone. Just give me a second here. Oh, I forgot the sound part. Okay, so I'm assuming everyone can see my screen. So hi everyone, I'm Markel Morfett, a PhD student at University of Toronto Scarborough under the supervision of Dr. Nick Mandrak. So I do, what I do is I compare eDNA fish species detection with seining and fyke netting in the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation's territory. And so essentially, and I work with their nation's coastal waters monitoring program. So they do all the conventional gear stuff and I do the eDNA work. So I wanted to create some outreach material directed at the Saugeen community. And I thought the best way to go about this, given that I want to discuss, methods and a bit about molecular biology, because that's what's being added onto the program. I thought it would be best to go through a video that I would upload to YouTube and then would be shared on, as Kat Keeshig talked about, native Facebook. So essentially, with all my contact information, if anybody has any comments or questions from the community. So essentially I would have a video where I would introduce what eDNA is, have some videos showing myself explaining the different equipment and actually doing the filtering, and a brief explanation of what happens from filter to species identification, because I get asked about what sequencing is a lot. And then I want to end with an interview of a SON aquatic ecologist, which I will show you part of. I might need to skip through a bit for time's sake though. How can eDNA sampling benefit the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation?
So one, I think I'm really happy that it's part of that sort of discovery phase of determining how useful it is, what sorts of errors there are, and how it compares to the tools that we're already using to look at fish distribution, abundance, presence, absence. And the second way would be in the future when we're looking at our sampling programs or our assessment programs every year, looking into what new areas we might want to assess and why, as we come up with new questions about new species or new environments. It might help us determine where and why we want to sample there before we put in substantial effort. I think the other way that sort of just come to my attention this year is we have a lot of big energy projects in the territory, and one right now that's undergoing an environmental assessment in the water in an area that we actually can't sample very well for fish because of exclusions related to sort of conventional sampling, both pike nets, gill nets, anything you would normally use.
I'll just skip ahead to the end here.
And learning more about fish and where they are. Ojibwe Nation, one of their top priorities is really around fish and water and learning more about fish and where they are. So I can see a lot of really cool applications as this sort of method of investigation gets more refined for the Great Lakes environment.
And of course, I would caption this video, and yeah, I could get it uploaded on YouTube and shared on Facebook. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, our next speaker is Blandine Dong, who is from the University of Windsor and is working on a master's project there.
Sorry, I was muted. Hello, everyone. Good. All right, hopefully everyone can see my slide. So today I'm going to talk about briefly my trial in Yellow Island aquaculture, and also I'm going to talk about the process of how I made my outreach item. Before I do that, I want to give special thanks to Dr. Heath and the farm staff, Elliot and Alex, for their help during my trial on the farm. Before I jump into my trial, I want to talk about a little bit background. So when fish are infected with Vibrio, which one of the pathogens I use to study, the fish innate immune system is activated to defend against the pathogens. As in other lymphoid tissues, the mucosal-associated lymphoid tissue is diffused with antigen-presenting cells, like dendritic cells, monocytes, and macrophages, just like in human. They present the antigens and activate the adaptive immune system. In this process, many immune effector molecules like cytokines and chemokines are produced to mediate the signaling pathways between the immune cells. The elevation in those molecules may indicate an ongoing infection in the organism. Because the fish mucus is directly secreted into water, the effectors should be detectable in water as well. In this study, I chose some of the infection-indicating cytokines for quantification. So on the farm, this is basically what I did. So I chose shrimp salmon to be my experimental animal. At day 0, I injected live Vibrio bacteria into the fish, just like here. And at day 1, 3, and 4 post-injection, I sampled fish tissues and fish culture water. Here is the setup for the filtering apparatus and the peritoneal cavity of the fish. As you can see here, because of the infection, the fish spleen is enlarged. By quantifying the biomarkers at mRNA and protein level, the elevation of biomarkers in water should be detected and with the pattern validated by fish tissues. So here comes to the outreach item. So I had 2 meetings with Dr. Fabria and Dr. Metlinger in July and August. So we talked about the format of outreach item based on the target audiences and the content. And then I had a couple meetings with the YAIO staff, Alex. Thank you, Alex. And we talked about like his opinion as a fish farm manager, like what information that he is interested in, and what issues on the farm that he is interested to deal with. So based on these valuable information that these people provided me, I made a YouTube video, which is here. But you can also search my channel, Blanding's Adventure in the World of Salmon. I believe you will see, yeah, the picture here. So the final topic of the video is it possible to test water and find if the salmon are sick? So here is the end of my talk. Thank you for listening. And there are some pictures from YAIO. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. Okay, our next speaker is Brooklyn Litke from the University of Manitoba, who is working on a master's project.
All right, thank you, Christine. Let me just confirm you guys can see my screen properly. I assume that's a yes.
Looks good.
You bet.
Perfect, thanks. So thanks again for the introduction. As Christine mentioned, my name is Brooklyn, and my FishCAST research project and outreach project broadly can be described as monitoring fishes using environmental DNA. Fish shed their DNA into the environment. Once that DNA is shed, it's collectively known as environmental DNA or eDNA and can be collected and used to detect their presence. eDNA has many applications in fisheries research, as we've seen with Katrina and Markel's presentations today. But for my research, I've been doing paired sampling alongside provincial and federal biologists, collecting eDNA samples while they are serving fish, either using electrofishing or gill netting to compare the efficacy of traditional methods versus eDNA sampling to detect the species of interest in my project, and to explore the possibility of abundance estimates using eDNA copy numbers. The simplicity of the collection and filtration of eDNA water samples allows for the opportunities and for collaborations and citizen science. So in 2021, in a collaboration between IISD Experimental Lakes and Dr. Margaret Docker's lab, of which I am a part of, the Monitoring eDNA and Learning Ecology with Youth pilot project was launched, where 10 high school students learned about science and ecology, including eDNA techniques, and took part in a fish monitoring program at Fort White Alive in Manitoba. In their exit surveys, the students shared how much they enjoyed the hands-on experiences of learning about eDNA, but were disappointed in the end that it ended at the filtration stage of the water samples. The students felt they were missing out on experiences and learning lab skills by not being able to participate in the eDNA extractions and qPCR for many reasons, including the lack of time for proper training and the experiences needed. The students were not able to be involved in that latter half of the work. So for my outreach item, I've created 2 hands-on learning activities targeted at the students in our outreach program that mimic the protocols that we use in our lab for eDNA extractions and qPCR plating to allow the students to have the opportunity to learn how to use pipettes and other commonly used lab equipment safely. These activities will be paired with presentations where the students will learn about each step in the protocols followed for DNA extractions and qPCR plating and analysis while they are doing the paired hands-on activities, either extracting DNA from a strawberry or following a protocol to mix and plate colored water. By pairing these presentations with the activities, I aim to create an immersive experience for the students that deepens their understanding of the latter half of the eDNA workflow, while providing them with experiences that the students in our pilot year felt they were lacking. So I'd like to thank everyone listed on this slide and many more people for their invaluable contributions to both my internship project and my outreach project. And I want to give a special thanks to the students in our pilot year for their enthusiasm, willingness to learn, and all the feedback they gave us. So thanks.
Thank you very much, Brooklyn. Okay, our next speaker is Ghislaine Banous, who's at the University of Quebec at Rimouski, and she's working on a PhD there.
Hello, everyone. Just share my screen. Can you see it?
Yep, looks good.
Okay. Okay, so bonjour tout le monde. Hello, everyone. I'm Ghislaine, a PhD student from Céline Audet Lab and co-supervised by Christina Semeniuk. And for my FishCAST research, I'm using a kind of behavioral genomic approach to assess the effect of domestication on the behavior of cherry streams of brook char in Quebec. And I'm working with a small fish culture facility. And for my outreach project, I choose to talk about the main topic of my both thesis and FishCAST project, which is epigenetic, as I noticed that most of non-specialists don't know a lot about it and think that it's really complicated to understand. So I'm talking about epigenetic using a comic, and I'm explaining through this comic what is exactly epigenetic and how it can help us to better predict the response of species to the climate change in general. And I choose decision makers as my target audience, because today, epigenetic or genomic studies are really in progress, but the problem that the results still not very used in the management and conservation plans. And this is a small caption of my comic, and just to give you an idea of what is in this comic, and especially what is the definition of epigenetic in my mind, I'm going to show you this short example. You know that in French or in English, both of them, it's the same. We have 26 alphabets to make a sentence, right? Okay, this is my sentence if I use just the 26 alphabet. Could you read it? I guess no. And it doesn't make any sense, right? And what we need, I'll answer myself because there is no enough time. So we need is all these kind of decorative elements that, for example, we have spaces, points, comma, and in French we have other elements, like it's more complicated than English. And now enjoy reading the sentence. And I'm sure now that you're wondering what is epigenetic in all of that. So here it is. Epigenetic is exactly the same. So it's all this kind of decorative elements that could be added on the genome, so the DNA sequence, but without modifying the DNA sequence. It's exactly the same, look like these decorative elements here in the sentence. And these decorative elements or epigenetic elements are really very sensitive to the environment. And for example, if we have a temperature change, this could lead to an epigenetic regulation that could change the gene expression, not the gene, but just how genes are working, and therefore the phenotype that we observe. So this is how we can use epigenetic to predict the response of species to their environment. So this is the main idea of my comic, and it's a kind of conversation between a scientist and a decision maker, and of course between fish, because it's a comic. So that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing. Okay, our next student trainee is Christian Tarian, who is at the University of Waterloo working on a PhD.
Hi, everyone. Can you see my screen okay?
Looks good.
Awesome. So hello, bonjour. My name is Christian Tarian, and I'm a PhD student at the University of Waterloo, and I am here to present my outreach project, focusing on some of the work I've been doing on my PhD on the effects of rainbow smelt on lake trout reintroduction in the Sudbury Basin. So the problem I wanted to reach out to the public and to notify the public of was of the harmful effects of invasive rainbow smelt on lake trout reintroduction in throughout Ontario, but particularly in this case in the Sudbury Basin, with a goal to educate anglers on the harmful effects of smelt in order to stop their spread and potentially sway future policy on invasive species management. And my partner for the summer and last fall was the Ontario Ministry of Natural Resources, the Aquatic Monitoring and Research Section in Sudbury, the Sudbury office. So I didn't actually work for the Sudbury District. I worked for the province just out of Sudbury. And to try to get to the public and tell them about the issue and educate them on the issue, I created a 2.5-minute TikTok video with a target audience of anglers and hunters and stakeholder groups such as rod and game clubs and Campers Association. And to do this, I looked at multiple outreach avenues, including TikTok, in which I got an account with over 2,000 followers, and on Facebook. I shared this video on Facebook on my personal and in a number of groups with thousands of members. So I created a real short snippet of my TikTok video for this talk. So I'm going to present it now.
Lake trout are an important fish culturally, recreationally, and economically in Northern Ontario, and rainbow smelt may be hindering reintroduction attempts of these important fish. Anglers need to be aware of the negative effects of smelt outside their native range and to never move smelt into new waterways. Anglers also need to be vocal proponents of smelt management and participate in pushing policy decision-making when it comes to invasive species. Anglers can also participate in smelt culling by harvesting them. Smelt tastes great. Eat your enemies. With your help, anglers can help make a difference in the reintroduction of lake trout into Ontario. Thank you.
So far, after publishing just a few days ago, the impact has been pretty good. I think I've been getting to my target audience. The TikTok video has over 500 views, 40 likes, 26 comments, and a couple shares. On Facebook, you can't really track views, but over 79 likes and 20 comments, including some great ones. We'll see what we as outdoorsmen can do. We're always wondered why others are negative. And on TikTok, my favorite comment of all time was this one, yo, believe smelts. So I thought that was funny. I've also shared this video with the Lake Wapite Home and Campers Association, an organization. I also gave an outreach talk in May to 80 members, and they distribute it to their organization of 300 members. Also plans to share to YouTube and Instagram a little bit of technological logistics. I gotta work around to get it on these platforms, but hope to get it out soon and release a smelt cooking TikTok video. As you can see in the video I shared, already you have that thing drafted, just got to publish it. And with that, you can find the video on my socials at Cisco Kid Outdoors. And I guess we're not taking any questions, but if anybody have any questions, shoot me up in the DMs. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for sharing. Okay, our next presenter is Hassan Palat, who is working on a master's project at the University of Windsor.
Oh, sorry. Let me just turn my camera Okay, so my outreach project is I decided to make a poster for recreational fishers of the Great Lakes because there's actually, as we know, there's an invasive species of lampreys that are inhabitants of the Great Lakes, but what most people don't know is they're also natural species of lampreys in the Great Lakes. And these lampreys can sometimes, like, they're hard to distinguish from each other. So if any anglers were to capture one of these, I put up here like traits to distinguish between either silver lampreys or chestnut lampreys, such as like the dorsal fin or traits about their teeth or their, I guess, yeah, how their teeth are structured. And as well as not to toss back sea lampreys into lakes if they're caught, and to report these to the Fisheries and Oceans Department of Canada, just because they like to track the invasive species, and they need more data on where these are found and how many are being caught. And for the silver and chestnut lampreys, I advise people to put these back in the water just because they're a species of conservation concern, but also to take photos and report these sightings on a website run by Canadian government called inaturalist.ca, just because these species are data deficient, and it would be good to be able to get more data on how many of these lampreys are still available or present. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hassan. Okay, our next speaker is Julia Wilsey, who is a master's student at the University of Windsor.
Hi, everyone. Like Christine said, my name is Julia Wilsey, and I'm a master's student at the University of Windsor in the Healthy Headwaters Lab. And today we're going to be talking about my outreach project, which is a coloring book about freshwater mussels. I've been studying freshwater mussels for nearly 4 years now, and I've learned that many people in the public don't actually know much about freshwater mussels. When we're out in the field, we normally get questions like, can you eat these mussels? To which I normally say, well, I wouldn't. And we also get questions about getting rid of the native freshwater mussels, often confusing them with the invasive draceniid mussels. So what I'd like this coloring book to do is to teach people that mussels are good for the environment and that mussels are in decline for various reasons. So here's just a few of the pages that I've done so far for my coloring book. I talk about how there's many different species across North America, as well as how mussels look very different in terms of species. And I specifically focus this on Ontario species, specifically on the Sydenham River watershed, which is where my project took place. I also talk about mussel habitat, as well as the importance of mussels to other organisms. And then these are just the pages that I haven't gotten to yet. I talk about how mussels filter water, how they're ecosystem engineers, and this really important and special relationship that they have with fish in order to reproduce. I also talk about how mussels continue to decline because their homes are impacted by humans. And my last page that I send everybody off with, because I'm targeting ages 5 to 10, I want to give the kids something to do at home to help save and protect freshwater mussels. So obviously there's like recycling and leaving only footprints when going into nature, but there's also things like taking photographs of shells and sending them to scientists through apps like iNaturalist, as well as cleaning beach toys and boats after playing in the water to stop the spread of invasive species. For distribution of this coloring book, I'd really like to work with my partners, St. Clair Region Conservation Authority, as well as the Healthy Headwaters Lab, my research lab, to hand this out, hopefully have an outreach event or two, as well as obviously social media. And then I'd like to have downloadable pages so that people at home, parents, teachers, whoever, can download these pages and share information on freshwater mussels. So obviously through this, I want kids to learn about freshwater mussels, but I also am hoping that this sparks an interest in freshwater ecology and wanting to save the earth and the waterways that are around them, because these children are truly the advocates of the future for the ecosystems. Thank you very much, and if you'd like to follow my project, you can follow us at Healthy Headwaters Lab or shoot me an email if you have any ideas for what might go in this coloring book. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Julia. Okay, our next presenter is Simone McLosey, who's at Western University working on a master's project.
Hi, just let me share my screen. Okay. Can you all see that?
Yep.
Okay, great. So, like you just said, my name's Simone, and I'm at Western, and my PI is Dr. Brian Neff. And I focus on environmental DNA research and Atlantic salmon, specifically looking at how environmental DNA can be used as a population monitoring tool, focusing on microsatellite DNA and mitochondrial DNA. And so in doing that, when we worked with FishCAST, my partner in my internship was the Ontario Federation of Anglers and Hunters. More specifically, I partnered with them to work on the Bring Back the Salmon program, where the OFAH stocks different rivers in Ontario with Atlantic salmon every year. So what we were able to do was collect water samples from different stocked and non-stocked rivers and determine if we could see Atlantic salmon presence absence. And then when we started talking about the potential, so in doing that, we were able to visit 34 different locations. And as you can see here, green identifies presence and black identifies absence. And in visiting 34 different locations, we talked to a lot of different people, specifically anglers and locals, about what we were doing. So then when we started talking about the FishCAST outreach program, my first thought was to make a video describing what the Bring Back the Salmon program is and how it relates to eDNA, specifically for anglers and locals, just because that's who I was interacting with the most. And I thought it would be helpful to have something easy for other people to understand eDNA because it can sound kind of complicated. So I reached out to the OFAH again to create this video, and they were very excited, but we shifted the focus a little, specifically changing the people we were targeting. So the Bring Back the Salmon program works with youth a lot, specifically creating videos and going to high schools explaining what they do. So they wanted me to create a video shifted from anglers to talking to youth about how eDNA was used with the Bring Back the Salmon program. So what my video covered was a brief history of Atlantic salmon in Ontario, what eDNA is and how we use it, and then how eDNA was used with the Bring Back the Salmon program to monitor the progress. So just to get a clear idea of the image I just showed, this is one of the later images in the video, and I thought I'd show it just to describe what I go through in the video, because the video is about 10 minutes long. So I talk about Atlantic salmon, how they release DNA, the types of DNA we were focusing on, and how you collect water samples and then look at the eDNA. And then I have a quick snippet of the video. I don't know how loud the audio is going to be. So if it's very loud, I'm sorry, or too quiet, just let me know and I can adjust the volume.
The Bring Back the Salmon program stocks Atlantic salmon in Lake Ontario and its tributary streams. But how do we know where the fish are going and if they're surviving? With population monitoring. So, what is population monitoring? Population monitoring is an umbrella term for different ways to figure out where fishes live, what fish species live where, and the size of each fish population. Traditionally, electrofishing and mark and recapture are used to monitor fishes, but they can require large teams and be time-consuming. But there is a new population monitoring method that might solve these issues. Environmental.
Stopped it a little short there, yeah, but it just describes what environmental DNA analysis is and how it relates back to the overall project. And that's what I did.
Thank you very much for sharing your project. Okay, our next presenter is Albana Berberi, who's from Carleton University and is doing her PhD there.
Thank you for the introduction. I'll just share my PowerPoint. Can you see my slides? Yes. Okay, perfect. So hi, my name is Albana. I'm in my third year of my PhD, and my PhD is looking at human-turtle interactions during water recreation. And to keep this outreach project fishy, I focused on angling as the water recreational activity, and more specifically, the interaction of accidentally hooking turtles when fishing. So here are just a few news articles that have been published within the last decade about accidentally hooking turtles, but it's become a more prominent issue, and a lot of turtle rehabilitation centers have noticed during x-rays as well. But I've noticed that there's been a lack of discussion on this topic on social media. I haven't really come across anything on social media talking about accidentally hooking turtles and what to do if that ever happens to you. So I developed an infographic and a few tweets about the infographic. So I'll show you the infographic quickly. It's what to do when you hook a turtle, and it has a blurb about the importance of protecting turtles and properly unhooking them, mainly because they are a vulnerable population and live long lives. And then I have steps along with descriptions on why these steps are important. And in the bottom, I have information on how to reach turtle taxis, which are volunteers here in Ontario, which will go and pick up injured turtles and bring them to rehabilitation centers for you. So the main target audience here, I was focusing on Southern Ontario, especially in lakes that have a species like spiny soft-shell turtles, because those are the ones that we're usually seeing being hooked. So areas like lakes around Windsor and around London. And so this is just a one-off tweet of the infographic, and I looked for hashtags that are commonly used for fishing and for conservation. And then I have a short thread which focuses on the why of this being important. And so mainly I talk about how it takes a long time for a turtle to replenish itself in the population. I included an x-ray of a swallowed hook from a hooking injury. And then the last tweet is the infographic. And then this is the longer series of tweets. And these ones focus on the steps more in depth. And I was going to input some GIFs as well, but just for the purposes of the slide, it wouldn't fit. So these are just the tweets with the words themselves. And again, the last tweet is the infographics to summarize the whole thread. I'm hoping to partner with lake associations in Southern Ontario so they can share this on their social media as well, and work with them if they would prefer to share this on other social media platforms like Facebook and Instagram. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, our next trainee is Jennifer Powell, who is at the University of Toronto working towards a PhD.
Hello. All right. Okay. Just see. Can everybody see the slides?
Looks good.
Okay. All right, sorry. Okay, so hello, my name is Jennifer Powell, and I'm a PhD student at the University of Toronto Scarborough. My outreach project involved creating a quick reference fish field guides for the water systems involved in my PhD research. I'm studying the habitat usage and requirements of the endangered lake chubsucker, and much of my fieldwork has been in conjunction with another PhD student from McGill University, Jessica Riemeyer, who is studying the threatened pug-nosed shiner. Our field research is focused on 2 lakes and 1 channel in Lambton Shores, a community on the southeast coast of Lake Huron. The study systems are all located within residential communities with a high percentage of retirees and summer cottagers. Due to frictions with local residents and scientific or conservation work in the past, it was recommended to us to set up a Facebook page to keep residents informed of our work and foster goodwill for the project. Thus, Just and Jen's Endangered Fish Adventure was created in May of 2021, and we've been posting to the page regularly since. The page hosts 4 main types of content. Firstly, posts on what we are doing and why, which help ease concerns about our work, as well as reduces public interference with our equipment. Secondly, we have many fun posts like videos from Jess's underwater cameras and pictures or videos of local wildlife, as these attract more people to the page and help ensure people see the more informative posts. Thirdly, we post about community events we are involved in, and finally, we post summaries of the results of our work. As we've done few results posts so far, I've made that the focus of my outreach project. Specifically, I decided to create posts to communicate the results of our fish community studies in the 3 systems. I thought presenting these results as field guides would be an effective way to simultaneously summarize the species found and educate about non-sport fish and SAR species, while also providing something useful for the residents. Each guide only includes the fish species confirmed in each system and provides information on species at risk status. A QR code links to the Facebook page if people want more information about the project. To help make identifications easier for novice fish enthusiasts, the guides focus on how to visually identify the fish when compared only to the other fish found in that system, while minimizing technical terms or jargon. You are less likely to care about something you haven't seen, so it is my hope that these guides will help local residents become more aware of the SAR around them and hopefully increase interest in their conservation. The guides were posted to the Facebook page with a link to a Google Drive where PDF versions can be downloaded freely. As of this week, the post had 519 direct engagements. Additionally, around 20 hard copies were handed out at a community corn roast, and download links were sent to 2 community group organizers. We've had very positive in-person feedback about the guides from several community members, including representatives of the municipality of Lambton Shores. I hope to continue with distribution of hard copies of the guides at future community events, and to distribute them also to the Oswald Bayfield Conservation Authority and the Pinery Provincial Park. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, our next trainee is Peter Baker, who is a master's student at Western University.
Hi, everyone. Can people see my slides?
Yes.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you very much for the introduction. Hi, everyone. My name is Peter Baker. I'm a master's student at Western University, and my master's research focuses on lake trout in the Great Lakes, and specifically how a thiamine deficiency is affecting cardiac function in lake trout. And for my outreach project, I created a magazine article, which is pictured here. And this is something I'm currently working on getting published in the Ontario Out of Doors magazine as well. And this article outlines the work that I've been doing in my thesis and also the work that I've been doing with the Ministry of Natural Resources for my FishCAST internship. The article is titled, "Where Are the Lake Trout? A Look into the History of Lake Trout in the Great Lakes and How a Vitamin Deficiency Might Threaten Their Future." And for the purpose of presenting the article, I made a short presentation sort of outlining the different sections. So starting with a little history of lake trout in the Great Lakes. For centuries, lake trout were an apex predator, but became extirpated in most areas by the 1960s due to overfishing and heavy predation by sea lamprey. And after the collapse of the lake trout, there was a pretty major shift in the Great Lakes prey fish community. And this was a shift from a community being dominated by native species such as bloater and cisco to a community based mainly on the invasive species alewife and rainbow smelt pictured at the bottom. And during this time and many years following, there was an increased effort to restore the lake trout population in the Great Lakes, but this had minimal success. So a big question concerning fisheries managers was what's killing the lake trout? And research eventually led to the discovery that lake trout were deficient in thiamine or vitamin B1, and that this deficiency was actually coming from those invasive prey species, alewife and rainbow smelt, pictured again at the bottom, which relative to native prey contain high levels of an enzyme called thymidase, which breaks down thiamine. And so what the question is, what's thiamine and why do fish need it? Well, thiamine is an essential vitamin that plays an important role in cellular energy production. And without it, you get all sorts of impairments to the nervous system and also maybe to the cardiac system. And that's what I'm focusing on for my MSc research. And that might affect the ability of lake trout to chase prey and flee from predators and all that important stuff. So what are some possible solutions to this issue? Well, the obvious one is that the restoration of native prey should be prioritized. But another possible solution is stocking certain strains of lake trout that might be more tolerant to thymidase. And this is something that colleagues and I are looking into as part of my thesis and as part of others' theses as well. And it's also something I'm looking into with the help of the MNRF, who generously allowed me to collect wild lake trout samples as I was working with them this summer. And that's something you can see on the bottom right photo is me pulling in some gill nets for lake trout. And specifically, I'm comparing between two strains, a strain from Lake Superior and a strain from Seneca Lake. And the photo on the top right is me in the lab doing echocardiographs on and looking at strain differences in these lake trout. So in conclusion, with the collective effort of fisheries managers, researchers, and fishermen, the once dominant and cherished predator can once again flourish in the Great Lakes. And thank you everyone for your time, and thanks everyone here for your contributions to my project. Special shout out to Brian Neff and the Neff Lab members and Chris Davis in the Upper Great Lakes Management Unit. And for anyone who wants to see that magazine article and read a little more, I have a QR code here that'll bring you to it. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing. Okay. Our next presenter is Morgan Anderson, who is a master's student at the University of Manitoba.
Perfect. Can my slides be seen?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, so my name is Morgan Anderson. As was stated, I am a master's student at the University of Manitoba. I'm currently being co-supervised by Dr. Margaret Docker and Dr. Gary Anderson. My thesis is focusing on using eDNA to study lake sturgeon here at the Winnipeg River. For my outreach project, I decided to focus on the applicability of environmental DNA as a complement to traditionally used methods in fisheries management. So for my FishCAST internship, I was fortunate enough to work with the Government of Manitoba's Department of Fishery and Wildlife at their Eastern Region branch. During my time there, I gained lots of valuable experience learning how to survey fisheries and manage them appropriately to benefit both wildlife and the public. Gill netting, trap netting, and angling surveys were just a few of the ways that we accomplished this. While these methods are very efficient at collecting a large array of species, there are some that manage to avoid the nets altogether. This was the case during a field program we ran at Reynolds Ponds while completing a gill net stock assessment. While it was known that there had been trout stocked and caught in these ponds in the past, we were unable to catch any in our nets after multiple sets and long days. This is where eDNA can be used during these field programs. Samples can be taken at the study site before and later run to detect if the species was present or not. While data such as weight, length, and health cannot be determined with this method, it does allow for confirmation that the species is still present in the system and could lead to different sampling methods being implicated in future surveys. eDNA can additionally be used to detect target species in backcountry lakes prior to field programs being run to save time and resources. This could allow a biologist to sample multiple lakes in a short period of time before deciding which areas require a more in-depth survey of the population. For my outreach project, I decided to create a series of blog posts talking about the applications of eDNA, how it can be used in situations such as our elusive trout, and how eDNA can be used at the government level from the perspective of a government biologist. I chose this platform as it allowed my information to be shared easily with government fisheries managers and biologists who may not be on social media, as well as the ability to embed photos and links to academic papers easily. I have a QR code at the top, the links to the website I created, and has links to all 3 of these blog posts on there as well. I'd like to thank my 2 supervisors at the Eastern Branch, Derek Croker and Eric Mullen. They were super helpful during the entire process. I can attach the link to the website in the chat, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Morgan. Okay, our last in-person, non-recorded presentation is going to come from Cheyenne Nolan. She's at the University of Windsor working on a master's project.
Hi, everyone. Just want to make sure you can just see the slides there.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Hello, Ani Buju, Bidabankwe Indigenous, Jijuk and Dodem, Bachuana Minwa Windsor and Donjuba, Nishnabekwe and Dao. My name is Cheyenne Nolan. My spirit name means First Light of Dawn Woman. I am Crane Clan and a member of Bachuana First Nation, but I'm lucky to live in Windsor, Ontario. I'm a master's student and part of the Healthy Headwaters Lab in the Heath Research Group. So my project is on fish habitat in the Anthropocene, using the landscape of Southern Ontario to investigate the streams where fish live and spawn their next generations. So starting from the end of April to just yesterday, I sampled urban, agricultural, and least disturbed reference streams and watersheds across the province for a grand total of 118 streams. As part of my field sampling, I had an outreach component built into my project and included in my MSc proposal. So for each stream, in addition to the environmental assessment, I did a photo survey fully capturing the habitat. So photography gives people a chance to connect to watersheds and gain a new perspective for the places that we live and share with other beings, including fish. The gaps that my project will address are lost community connections to place and difficulty visualizing environmental impacts. So my goals are to create a visual guide to stream ecology while also centering Indigenous place names for the waters and the land that they flow through. The mobilization of my project will include the creation of digital infographics available for open source download and the presentation of my photo project in a physical gallery space in collaboration with the Incubator Art Lab at UWindsor. So although this project is very much a work in progress, I will share a couple examples. So here, underwater images are a good way to visualize stream fish habitat and facilitate discussions around sediment type, turbidity, and habitat structural elements like gravel and woody debris. Panoramic images are useful in visualizing differences in canopy cover and affects light penetration of the water column. So seen here is a naturalized reference stream compared to a channelized urban stream that receives virtually no shade, and it's pretty stark to see in the images. Human impacts can also be seen clearly from drone images. So in this example, I have an agricultural stream where the turbidity and soil erosion can easily be seen from the sky. And so in addition to photos, I also hope to include videos in my exhibition so that people can experience firsthand the magic of these streams and some of the moments that we as researchers got to share with the living beings in these spaces. And finally, in every output from this project, I will be including Indigenous language to ensure that we remain to be seen. So here, Wawiatanong, where the river bends, is the traditional place name for the Detroit River and the surrounding area where I and many of us sit today. And here's the Incubator Art Lab, where I will be collaborating with Dr. Jennifer Willett to host the gallery show, where I hope that people can experience Ontario streams and what it might be like to be a fish in the Anthropocene. I can't wait to share the finished project with all of you. I'd like to thank my supervisors for letting me run wild across Ontario this summer and my lab mates for joining in on the adventure. Miigwech.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we have 2 pre-recorded talks to finish off the session, but before we do that, I wanted to ask if Baptiste wanted another opportunity to share his video.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, thank you.
So this timing gonna work. Okay, do you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, nice. So in the background is the video of when I was on the fieldwork. So let's see.
Hello everyone, I am a master's student in oceanography in Rimouski, Quebec. I am working on the determination of the survival rate and stress levels generated by recreational catch and release fishing on striped bass. During my summer fieldwork in Gaspésie, near the Bay of Heat, in French, La Baie des Chaleurs, I met many fishers who doesn't like striped bass. In their opinion, they eat salmon and lobster so they can't fish these species anymore. I also met striped bass lovers, and I would like to remind them of what scientists and their research have shown. More information and data on this project will be available on a longer version of this video. Thank you for your attention, and have a nice day.
So that was just a short video on my outreach project. But in the longer version of this video, I will explain in the detail the diet of striped bass, what they eat, and if it's a species danger for the other species. I also give an update on the history of striped bass, why the population decrease, and I'm targeting all fisher on this video, eaters, lovers, because each side is right on in point. So I work on the full version of the longer video. This video will be released in 1 or 2 weeks. So that's all for me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm glad it worked.
Yeah.
Okay, so now our last two presentations are pre-recorded, so Kendra is going to share those for us. The first is by Laura Hannaford, and she's at Carleton University working on a master's project.
This project, I prepared a series of tweets which outline the benefits, issues, and ongoing research into combining non-lethal sampling.
Sorry, were you able to hear the audio?
Yep, we could hear it.
Hey everyone, my name is Laura, and for my outreach project, I chose to focus on the integration of non-lethal biopsy methods and telemetry. For this project, I prepared a series of tweets which outline the benefits, issues, and ongoing research into combining non-lethal sampling with telemetry, and have designed an infographic to accompany them. My target audience is other researchers who use telemetry to study fish movement, and for this project, I have partnered with GLaDOS and GenFish. Telemetry is a method that scientists use to study the movement of animals. In fish, this is typically done by surgically implanting them with an electronic tag. Telemetry is really useful for telling researchers things like whether or not a fish migrated successfully, but it doesn't tell us why one fish made it while others didn't. To learn this, we need to use other methods. Non-lethal sampling is done by removing small amounts of blood or tissue and can tell us so much about a fish's health, fitness, and interaction with its environment. It is quick, minimally invasive, and also relatively inexpensive. Tagging fish provides us with an excellent opportunity to take these samples, but researchers are concerned about how non-lethal sampling may impact the post-release behavior and survival of their fish. This outreach project outlines the current validation work on any potential effects that non-lethal sampling may have on fish. Additionally, this project highlights the impact that pairing these technologies may have on conservation, as it allows us to more accurately determine the mechanisms behind movement and to target our conservation efforts and resources towards the specific needs of a population, whether that be disease prevention, habitat restoration, or construction of infrastructure to assist migration and restore connectivity. I hope that this outreach project promotes the integration of these two techniques in order to provide researchers with a greater understanding with what impacts fish movement. My outreach project can be found on Twitter or by following these hashtags.
Okay, thanks Laura for providing that ahead of time. Our last presenter is Declan Burton, who's PhD student at Carleton University. And so Kendra is going to share his presentation as well.
Personally invested in, not only as a researcher, but also as an angler. I set out to produce something that could effectively convey to anglers the benefits of working alongside scientists and decided to focus on angling tournaments alongside mRNA transcriptomics. And my thought process for using angling tournaments was twofold. Firstly, at many angling events, there's a congregation event, and this is where all the anglers bring their catch, and this is a great opportunity for scientists to collect data without needing to expend large amounts of resources. Secondly, angling tournaments are often of interest to a wide selection of the angling community, not just its participants. So as a result, this is, offers a potential for scientific work to reach a wider audience. And I felt in order to reach the widest possible audience, that a magazine article would probably be the most effective. It has the ability to be printed, but also placed online, with the online version having that added benefit of being shareable. However, as a whole, I kind of pivoted away from this more focused approach and felt it would be more beneficial as an individual example to express the benefits of working with scientists and how the result can be quite effective. So while I broadened the scope, I did still include a good amount of information and focus on non-lethal sampling. I felt that by stressing that this sampling was quick and had minimal impact on the fish, that we would see a more positive response. And as you can see from this image, these are the different kind of tissues that we're able to take, and I've primarily used gill samples supplemented with muscle biopsies when appropriate. And this could be a whole presentation by itself. But I just wanted to give you guys a quick idea, the image being taken from Ken Jeffries' paper. So it's been increasingly well documented that community-involved science is often viewed as being successful in the sense that it's implemented at the community level. And a good example of this would be, the Keep Fish Wet movement, which is a science-based set of best practices for catch and release angling. And by their own outreach and involving the community, it has been very successful globally. And stakeholders seeing us in person makes science real. They're able to interact with us and ask questions. This outreach aims to encourage this kind of interaction for people to not feel defensive when they initially meet us. And in turn, this means as scientists, we need to do our part to be approachable. It's all well and good coming to our own conclusions behind closed doors, but it's important that we lead science communication, explain that we are working for the benefit of the total system, which in turn benefits multiple stakeholders. So this is as much as I've achieved so far. You can kind of see the rough layout of the article, and you can see I've tried to make it a little bit less text heavy, and I've added a few points that I'd like to kind of adjust as we go forward, and make it a little bit more achievable. So thank you very much for listening. I'm personally invested in, not only as a researcher, but also as an angler.
Okay, so thank you to Declan too. And then I just want to take a minute for all of us to say thank you for the trainees for presenting their research and their outreach topics, and for all the effort that the trainees put into this experience and this journey, because almost all of them were overlapping this process with also doing field work. So it was a phenomenal undertaking over the past few months. The other thing too that I want to thank the trainees for is part of this process has been discussion circles, where the trainees have had the opportunity to give feedback to one another on their projects. So we've seen a lot of evolution in terms of what started at a proposal stage and now has kind of come to fruition as a final project. And a lot of that has been because the trainees have been so wonderfully supportive of one another in terms of providing feedback and just overall kindness to one another. I have been so impressed. I know Catherine has been so impressed with what has been produced. Thank you also to the trainees for teaching me new things as we've gone through this micro-credential together. And thank you to everyone in the audience who stuck around for this part of the AGM to show your support for the trainees as well.
Fantastic, everyone. Before we make a break, we wanted just to, again, announce the photo contest winner. So we asked our FishCAST trainees to submit photos under, I think, 4 different themes. Kendra, correct me if I'm wrong, but it was beauty, it was fieldwork fun, mishaps, and then connections. And so we polled.
And beauty.
Yes, beauty. So beauty, fun, mishaps, connections, right? So Kendra, thank you so much, sent out a survey. The students voted on their top 3. And so for each category, the top winner gets $150. Second place gets $100. Third place gets $75. And so we wanted to thank everyone. We'll figure out, Kendra and I, how to get that money to you, but know that we have it. We'll just got to get it to you. Kendra, do you want to share who the winners are, if you don't mind? Drum roll, please.
I'm not sure. Oh, let me know. Is that presenting correctly?
We saw it a little bit and then it disappeared. Kendra's just drawing out the tension.
Yeah.
Oh, this is perfect. Excellent. All right, so Kendra, you take it away. You show us who the winners are. You collate it all.
Yeah, I gotta say, this is like one of the funnest things I've done in my job so far. I loved all the pictures that the trainees sent in. It was a joy to see like all of the photos that people had taken. Some of them are really spectacular. Is this like a full view for everyone? Because I want you to be able to see the pictures. Okay. So this is just a sample of some of the pictures that were sent in. Our first category was beauty. In third place, we have Albana with waders and fike nets all day, every day. Second place was Katrina, no winds or waves, a rare sight on Lake Winnipeg, Manitoba. And first place was Jennifer with underwater balloons, which this photo is just phenomenal. Second category was fun. Third place was Brooklyn. I don't know if I'm going to pronounce that river correctly, so somebody can jump on for me. Assiniboine River? I'm not sure.
It's the Assiniboine.
Thank you. Second place, Jennifer, again, with doing the wave. And our first place in fun is Acacia with Fun in the Sun. Next category, connections. Third place, Simone with Making Connections. Second place, Brooklyn with gill netting on Lake Winnipeg. And first place, Albana with tracking turtle movements with the Cubes field course. And our final category was mishaps. Third place, Katrina, a group of hungry birds stealing the angler's catches by the dam in Lakeport, Manitoba. Second place, Christian with biggest catch of the day, ... And first place, Dominique with fike net meat snapping turtle. And an honorable mention going to Peter for some awesome pictures that the FishCAST Admin team and I really enjoyed. So thank you all for submitting all these wonderful pictures. It really was fantastic. Thank you.
And Peter, there's a cash prize too. So don't think it's just like a little participation ribbon that you get. So yeah, we wanted to thank everyone. Thanks to Kendra too for putting that all together. It was a lot of fun. We loved it. So I hope you can all see why we think FishCAST is such a success. I think our trainees showcased it. I am getting comments offline about how wonderful it is and how creative our trainees are. And we're so impressed with what they're going to be doing, and we're going to be following them into their successful careers in the future. Again, I want to give a big thanks out to the FishCAST community for making what it is. We're 2 years in. I feel like we've come so far. We are accomplishing, I think, making great strides. We still have a lot more to do. We still have a lot more on the horizon, but we're off, I think, to a positive start with our intentions and our journeys together. And I really can't wait to spend the other 5 years, because remember, there's that no cost year extension. The next 5 years with you all and the trainees, please keep in touch. We're going to be doing exit surveys. We always want to learn. We want to readjust. We want to course correct. And so again, we can't do it without you. So thank you everyone for helping us celebrate the second year of FishCAST all together. Our recordings will be made available. So if you want to pass it along, or if there are other partners you want to see, or students, please feel free. And again, thank you for spending the time with us this afternoon. And again, we're looking forward to seeing everyone again real soon. Thank you, trainees. Merci tout le monde. Chimagwech, and have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you, everyone.
Everyone. Take care.